Hello, everyone. My name is Angelica Arbeláez, and I am the Programs Coordinator at Untitled Arts. Thank you all for joining us this evening for our second edition of Ellies Connect. Ellies Connect is a new
Sorry, everybody. We just are having some technical difficulties, but thank you for your patience. I will start my introductions from the top. So, hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Angelica Arbeláez, and I am the Programs Coordinator at Untitled Arts. Thank you all for joining us this evening for our second edition of Ellies Connect. Ellies Connect is a new online conversation series with Ellies winning artists on the themes that shape their work. For those of you who are not familiar, the Ellies is one of Untitled Arts' signature programs, offering a share of $500,000 to Miami-Dade artists to help celebrate and elevate their careers. Please save the date for our 2020 open call on June 2nd, and for more information, please visit us at theellies.org. Before we begin, I want to encourage everyone to submit their questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screens. As tonight's moderator, I will be selecting and reading out your questions during the Q&A at the end of the conversation. Tonight, I am thrilled to have Ellies winners Jenna Balfe and Morel Doucet in conversation. I'll read a little bit about each of our speakers, and then we'll get started. Jenna Balfe's performance art practice focuses on reconnecting the cycle between the self and the natural world. By realizing the existential value of nature and our undeniable tie to it, Balfe believes we can rediscover our empathy. This discovery can allow for a pathway to a sustainable partnership between our own individual psyches and reality, ourselves to plant and animal, and eventually a recursive loop between all elements. Merle Dussette is a Miami-based multidisciplinary artist and arts educator that hails from Haiti. He employs ceramics, illustrations, and prints to examine the realities of climate gentrification, migration, and displacement within the Black diaspora communities. Through contemporary reconfiguration, his work catalogs a powerful record of environmental decay at the intersection of economic inequity, the commodification of industry, personal labor, and race. Without further ado, I want to invite our two speakers to join me on the virtual stage. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, guys. Hey.
Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
That's great. Morel, Jenna, I'm so excited to be in conversation with you guys today. You know, when we were first thinking about Ellies Connect, we really envisioned this program as a way to create more engagement between our Ellies winners. And, you know, we also wanted to find ways to show how similar our Ellies winners can be. And in addition to that, we, you know, are gearing up for our next open call, as I mentioned in the introduction. And so this is a really great way for other artists who may be interested in the Ellies for them to sort of get a peek at what winning an Ellie is like, and just the kind of projects that we fund. So I think a great way to start is to just have both of you tell us a little bit about each of your Ellies projects. Jenna, we'll start with you.
Cool. Hi, everybody. So my project that received an Ellies Award was called Transnaturism, and basically it's a play on a theory by Ray Kurzweil called the singularity, and it's a transhumanism. So it's just like a slight play on that transhumanism, transnaturism. And his theory postulates that humans are eventually going to merge with technology to become better, more efficient machines. And transnaturism kind of pokes fun at that and suggests that perhaps we can evolve into the organic aspects of our world, nature, each other, our connection with our souls and our consciousness that we kind of sometimes forget about. And so this turned into a performance art project. There were 2 iterations of it. I was lucky enough to have 2 opportunities to perform this work. The first one was at NADA Art Fair at the end of 2019, and that was through the support of BFI, and that was an awesome experience. We built this huge, crazy log, which kind of represented like the dissonance of human struggle with nature. It had like a sail on it and wheels, and you had to push it, and it was like very Sisyphean, like pushing the rock up the hill. There was a musical score for it. And then the second iteration was Metro Movement, which happened in downtown Miami, and that was also supported by BFI. And it was like this tour through downtown Miami using the People Mover to get around and walking, and there were different performances at all these different sites where people were representing this kind of dissonant connection to the city and to each other and particular architectural elements, but also working in this connection to nature and how it could work, and kind of at times tongue-in-cheek looking at like the combination of the 2. So
Very cool. Morel?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Morel Doucet. My Ellies project was titled White Noise, When Raindrop Whispers and Moonlight Screams in Silence. So my entire project was a accumulation of 5 years of work. The exhibition was held at the African Heritage Culture Art Center, which is the sort of nucleus here in South Florida when it comes to Attapata in that neighborhood. And so the basis of the project essentially started off with ideas of what is going on in the ocean with the bleaching of the coral reefs. And then from that initial project, it evolved to how communities of color were being affected. And so really the entire exhibition is a giant allegory of different forms of conversation. And so throughout the exhibition, I essentially invited the viewer to navigate the exhibition, but it was in the same sort of context. I guided them sort of in an invisible way based on how the layout of the exhibition was. And so when the audience entered the room, they were first encountered with a installation at, it was a long bench, about 16 feet long. And on top of the bench were ceramic fish. And the title of that exhibition, the title of that work was called The Ocean Dances Over Sun-Buttered Mountain. And you know, with a lot of my work, I use allegory in order to communicate my message. I tried not to direct the viewer by kind of like encourage them to kind of explore the work. And I use beauty, a little bit of grotesque in order to communicate that information. And so Jenna, you know, your project was incredible. I had a really great time looking through the videos. And one of the images that really stood out to me was the one with Misael next to the water. So I don't know if you couldn't sort of elaborate that on for the audience a little bit.
yeah, sure. So that image, I think we actually have that one here, but it's basically, so the nature of the work, it's like a score. So there's choreography, there's a theme, there's a narrative that people are working within, but people are also left space to be inspired by the moment, inspired by the audience, inspired by the space. And so in this particular scene, we were on the rooftop of I call it the Centrist building. It's that building in downtown Miami that lights up like purple or green or whatever on whatever holiday. And they have this area called the Sky Lounge that's like all coral and has these beautiful pools and trees and ficus growing over the coral. And it's very like decadent. It's like this decadent oasis in downtown Miami. And this was the finale for the Metro Movement performance. And so at this point, this is the second run of it. You know, each performance takes a long time. We're deeply involved in this narrative. At this moment, we're like in the last place on earth that has any trees. And it just happens to be this building. And so we've all kind of like dragged ourselves here, struggling through like this existential crisis of connecting to each other, connecting to architectural structure, connecting to these old bits of technology that no longer are used for what they're intended for. And Misael, who's an amazing performer, this was in a scene where people were walking by to find the death march, and they just became inspired to get in the pool and started just throwing these flowers. It reminds me of Ophelia in a way, when she's just mad in the water with the flowers around her head. And they were just throwing out these flowers and brushing them on the keyboard. And to me, it was just such a beautiful culmination of a lot of the intention in the work, where you have this beautiful bouquet of flowers that obviously you can't pick anywhere. You know, you have to buy it from somewhere, but here we are in the end of the world, so that already doesn't make sense. It's a keyboard that's kind of being used as like a pet or like a soundboard, who knows? And there's Misael just in this total like reverie of sort of indulgence, giving up all at once. And so for me, it's just it really encapsulates a lot of the feeling of the work.
Wow. So I was also kind of interested, as an artist, how do you identify the sites for your activations?
Sure. So I also am a musician. I am in a band called Danzi, and I'm the lead singer. Sometimes I play guitar. If any of you guys are watching, don't laugh. And I also, I garden. I've been gardening a lot, and I consider that to be art, straight up, because like I'm out there. The garden is in the front of the house. On the side, I was able to put 2 plots, and people are always talking to me and like coming around, and they literally want to know what grows in my garden, you know. And I feel like that's like the, you know, like the heart of my art. It's like people are like talking to me, and sometimes I try to get these complex ideas about like art and theory and blah blah, and I'm just like, no, like I'm here, I'm touching my squash and talking to you, like.
Well, Jenna, you bring up something really interesting, in that when all 3 of us first met and we started talking about what this conversation would look like, you guys like weren't really that familiar with each other. And I think the beautiful thing about this program is that it brings people together that, you know, share similar interests, similar, you know, research topics. And Jenna, during our first meetings, you shared something really touching about your experience growing up with nature, and you described nature as a playmate. And Morel, I feel like you identified with that, you know, a lot, which, you know, I think is what was really special about that interaction. Can you both talk about how, you know, being physically in nature informs your artistic processes? Like, I know both of you shared that you kind of take walks as a way to sort of start an idea. So Merle, can you sort of share a little bit about how being in nature informs your work?
Absolutely. So Jason, I don't know if you can pull up that short video I sent you. It's a video of some new work actually I'm working on in the studio. So at the moment, before I went into quarantine, for the past year, I've been going to different neighborhoods and picking up flora and fauna from each of these neighborhoods. And they vary in the form of plants, of flowers, of leaves, of rocks, dirt, pebbles. And so for me, when I began walking through these neighborhoods, the environment became a sort of documentation of what was happening and a sort of bookkeeper. And so I would pick up the plants from these neighborhoods, and then I'll bring them back to the studio in order to create a stencil of my work. And so right now in the studio, this is a brand new body of work. And the title of this series is called Water Graves in the Six Shades of Death. And within the work, the patterns, the textures are created directly from the plants that I've been gathering in different parts of the city. So at the moment, I've gone to Overtown, Miami, Attapata, Liberty City, Miami Gardens. And, you know, in a very similar experience to Jenna, when I'm in these neighborhoods, you know, people want to come up to you. What are you doing? Why are you gathering plants? Why are you picking up grass? Why are you picking up flowers? So it's really interesting how just the mere fact of you being in the neighborhood and you're doing something out of the ordinary, you can attract people to that sort of to a very similar experience that Jenna is talking about.
So funny. We really have a lot of similarities in the way that we like physically connect to the nature and try to bring that into the work, you know?
Jenna, can you talk a little bit about just what your process is like?
Sure. You know, again, very similar to Morel, a lot of it for me starts with this idea of bringing the outside in, you know, like connecting to where I am physically. So it's through long walks. I also love to climb in mangroves. I feel like when I'm doing that, I feel like I'm really connecting to this land in particular because the mangroves hold us in, you know, their little roots are down and holding the sand and keeping us safe. So I feel like that's a pretty honest place for me to go and ask, you know, it's spiritual for me, you know, I'm literally asking like, what could I say for you that can't speak, at least can't speak the language that we speak?
Another image I would like to put up, which is the largest piece I've done today. It's a large installation. It's in a formation of a clock. And the artwork essentially is using time as a metaphor. And I'm examining the idea of the doomsday clock and the pending environment of what is going on. And so with this piece at the center of the clock, there's a figure, and the figure is embellished with different floras and faunas around it. And then the eyes of the figure are completely covered as well. So it alludes to the idea that we as a collective, as humanity, we're blindsided, we're short-sighted, and we're refusing to acknowledge and take action to save the environment. And within the formation, there's different conversations that are taking place. So one layer is the idea of colorism. Colorism is very prevalent in the Caribbean, me being Haitian myself. The idea of Blackness, what does it mean to be a person of a darker complexion and navigating different spaces within culture. And so, you know, with my work, and very similar, I can imagine for you, Jenna, my work is very labor intensive. Certain pieces can take up to a month or more in order for me to make. So my question to you is, you know, how do you devise your time between being a music artist, being a visual artist, and sort of activating different parts of the city with your practice?
I mean, that's a good question. I'm still kind of figuring out how to do that better. I found that the way it's been working best for me is to really find ways where everything connects so that I can kind of like double up on things. You know, it's like when I'm dancing, when I'm trying to think of like a particular movement pattern for something, sometimes I'll dance to Donzi music, even if I'm not going to set it to that, like as a warm up, or like, you know, I think of, sometimes I'll mix things up, like the lyrics to a Donzi song could be from a narrative from one of these performance pieces, because they often start as poems, you know? So I think that's one way that I deal with time. I know that in your work, I know that, you know, it takes, each piece, like you said, can take an incredibly long period of time. I wonder if sometimes during that process, do you ever find that you want to shift the sort of the image that you're creating based on something that's happened to you, like based on like maybe like some, like you're doing it on a certain area and all of a sudden some giant developer comes in or something like that, and it's like, I don't know, I was just curious.
So with my work, the way I've been able to kind of deal with the slow kind of process is by working on multiple works at once. So in the studio, I can have anywhere from 6 to 10 pieces around me. And, you know, every day I come in, depending on my mood or whatever the work is telling me, that's what piece I attract to. With my practice, I'm not solely confined to ceramic. So I do use other kind of mediums depending on photography, printmaking, silk screening in order to inform the work. And then with my practice also, it's very important that the information is factual. So I use different forms of data, from the CDC, from the Environmental Protection, from the Everglades. So for me, my work is about taking information and how do I break down the information and presenting it to the audience that it's giving them freedom to understand the context of my work, but then at the same time, they can still appreciate the beauty of the work for what it is, So I don't force the viewer to try to get a deep meaning from my work. If they want to appreciate the work for what it is, then they're welcome to leave it at that. And so for your work, do you expect audience to engage in the performance, or what do you want audience to get from the work when they come in contact with it?
Oh, you're breaking up a bit.
Can you hear me? My audio might be off.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, folks. I guess the Wi-Fi gods are not with us today.
Oh, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I think Morel was asking something, and I couldn't hear the last or what it was.
Can you guys still hear my voice?
Yep,
yes,
we can hear you.
I hear you. Me. I see you.
Oh, you do? Okay. Oh, right, perfect. I'm back. All right, no problem. Yeah, it's thunderstorming outside, and so the Wi-Fi is pretty choppy. So my question was, do you expect audience to interact with you as an artist, or can people just be a bystander in the work?
Right. That's actually something I've thought a lot about as an artist. I like to give people the space to interact and even become part of the work, but I don't like to make people feel threatened or like almost like I expect them to be part of this and I expect them to feel something, because people are going to feel what they want to feel. Sometimes I can have the best intention in the world and someone's just like, wow, like this totally like stinks, or like this doesn't relate to me, or like actually this really triggers me, like, and so I don't like, if I'm kind of like forcing someone to like be part of it, I like to leave space for people to even feel comfortable enough to leave, and that's like, I feel like for me, that's how I also, that's me working through my ego, that's like a way that my art helps me to be I hope, a better person, or at least a more understanding person in some way. I have something I wanted to ask you. There was one, your porcelain work, the busts, you said something that you use porcelain to elevate nature. And when we were talking before, you explained a lot of what went into that and why you chose that and the different prints and designs. And I just thought that was such an interesting, powerful usage of materials and understanding these different symbols that are used to represent wealth and value, and just kind of like how that then relates to nature and how we use nature and this whole, I just wondered if you could speak about that a little bit, because I think that piece is really wonderful.
Thank you. So for the audience, so for me, I use my ceramic work, as Jen was saying, to elevate nature and to give it a platform of high status. Within our human history, when it came to porcelain ceramic, at a certain point, porcelain had the same monetary value as gold. And so whenever you went into someone's house of upper class, of a certain status, they would have a piece of porcelain near the mantle of the door, near the fireplace, as a symbol to kind of see in their home. And so for me, I use porcelain in that sort of context to elevate nature. And so with this piece in particular, up on the screen, it's called Skin Congregate on the Eve of Every Mountain. And this piece is really talking about the idea of colorism. And so I'm using the symbol of the dandelion to allude to the idea that Black and brown people essentially don't have the freedom to move where they want. They kind of go with the flow. So when a developer moves into a neighborhood, like the dandelion, they kind of blow with the wind. So the developer determines where Black and brown people can live and stay. And then within the middle, that figure is embellished with cobalt blue. And cobalt blue has a very particular sort of place in history, because cobalt blue, it has a very refined, very elegant, people that were part of, of kings, queens would use teacups that has cobalt blue embellished within there. So the middle is essentially for our white kind of allies, using their power, using their privilege to do something about it, which is why that figure is grounded in the middle and is looking directly at the audience. And then in the back is the other, they're hidden in the back. Those stand for the undocumented immigrants, those that are present, but they don't have the political status or the legal status in order to take a form of action. And so, so I use these very small kind of nuances within the work to create and juxtapose bigger kind of meaning within the work. But then in the same context, as I said before, the viewer can appreciate it for the beauty of it, or if they want to engage in deeper conversation about the work, then there's all these different layers within the work. I don't know if you want, let me kind of bring it back to you again, so for me, ceramic, is very important. I've been using ceramic over the course of the last 10 years. And, I've been using it, it's important for me. Ceramic is the only material when it comes to art that interlace history, culture. We're able to understand a large part of a human evolution based on what culture from the past leaves behind, So a archaeologist can go into a site, they can dig up the site, we can understand the dietary needs of a person. Women that are pregnant in other countries, they eat the soil in order to get minerals from it. And so ceramic, is not just this material, this substance that we use to make things. We need it for our body. People that drink milkshakes, like from McDonald's, there's bentonite in that milkshake, which is another raw kind of material. And so, so ceramic, is part of life. We use it in cosmetics. We use it in our everyday means. So for me, it's an important material. I think of it as something that has a magical kind of realism when I think of that material.
So, Merle, speaking of your ceramic work, I feel like there's definitely an element of hybridity in that work, and I'm thinking more of the work that sort of melds the human with the plants and nature. And so, you know, and I know Jenna, like especially during your with your transnaturism project, you know, you speculate the possibility of humans merging with nature. So I was wondering if, you know, before we start taking questions from the audience, if you guys can talk about hybridity a little bit. Oh, no one can hear me, I guess.
I hear you now.
Yeah. Let me turn.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's
so,
okay.
can you, so the segue that I kind of wanted to get into was this question of hybridity, because Morel, in your ceramic work, I see there definitely there's evidence of the human sort of merging with nature, with plants. And Jenna, I know with, you know, your Ellies project Transnaturism, there is this sort of speculation of what that future might look like. So I was wondering if you know, before we start taking questions from the audience, if you both can sort of touch upon this idea of hybridity and what that idea, you know, says about what you think of our future, essentially.
It's a, you know, nice question to exit with. Let me think here. I think, you know, one way, I feel like a lot of this stuff is going to get eaten up by the plants. That's it. I just feel like I look at a lot of the absurdity. I look at how greedily people are erecting buildings. I look at some of this. It's just like, you know, coming back to value and the way that Morel represents that in his work. It's just this, like, people want to represent value with these resources from the earth in this way that's just so, like, you know, without consideration of caring for the earth, of creating this cycle, which I think Morel also spoke about, how there's this magical cycle that's happening in the work that he's creating. And I think that's something that's really missing from a lot of what we create with our hands in the world. So I feel like the future is going to be one where, you know, a lot of these things shift, not by choice. I mean, look at sea level rise, you know?
So to kind of to piggyback what Jenna's saying, so for me, I come from a farming background. My grandfather had 11 kids, and he put each one of them through school through farming. And so growing up, I've always had the belief instilled in me that land is wealth. And so for me, I cannot imagine a future without land, without the environment. We see what happened in Florida in the last couple of years with red tide and blue-green algae. Florida, you know, we're a cultural destination and tourism drives the economy. And so with red tide, with blue-green algae, it completely decimated that industry where restaurants were closing and could not serve seafood from the water. And so I think we need a wake-up call. And maybe COVID is that wake-up call. You know, we see how the earth, the ozone layer has recovered over the past couple of weeks. We see how the water has cleared up. And so COVID essentially has been a small kind of sample of what the earth could look like if we cut back on the resources that we're spending and the waste that we're doing. And so kind of to piggyback off of what's going on with COVID, so with your practice, how do you see it evolving going forward into the future?
With COVID, I mean, you know, it's definitely become a much more personal practice. A lot of my work depends on other people, other bodies, physically touching other bodies. So it's really forced me to look within and really think about how, you know, I can communicate to people without being in their presence. So that means video in some cases. That means, music, which you know, we've released a song recently, Donzi plug. And, you know, again, spirit, there's a lot of performance that I do that nobody sees. I literally I go out and I perform for the earth. I climb in trees, and for me, it's not just like, you know, it is playing, but it's also like a performance, sometimes for a drop of water on a leaf, or like, you know.
That just rung a bell with me, that line, how you go out and you perform for nature. I remember when I was little, my grandfather, whenever I would kind of sneak up and try to go with him, I'm farming. And it's a ritual for him to sing when he's planting corn and the yams, you know? So it's like, it's a ceremony, you know, you're happy that you're putting something into the earth. And then in the same context that, you know, that kind of nurturing is going to produce something back for you, you know? So you take something and you put it back and it gives you more, you know?
Yes. I love that.
So I think this would now be a good time to transition into our Q&A. I know some folks submitted a few questions. And I guess we'll start with one from Jeff Swinton. Morel, how do you decide what mediums you use to tell your stories?
Ooh, that's a really great question. So for me, I work very organically. I think there is beauty within using less materials. And so for me, I try to use what I have first in the studio to try to completely use up that material first. And then once I'm completely done, then I can move on to other forms of material. But for me, I don't have a preference. Ceramic is my go-to medium, but it's not necessarily my favorite to kind of work with. It's based on what message I'm trying to create at the moment.
Great. Let's see. Well, we have another question from Lou Fuller. She says, your work, I think is she, yes. Your work is so important to our survival. What unfinished questions do you both see in your work, and what are some ways that we will transform or must transform? And maybe you guys can speak to this specifically as it relates to your respective Ellies projects.
Sure. I think some unfinished questions that I have literally are how to, is in particular to costume design. Actually, I really want to use costume design to convey a message of how it could actually physically look, like the sort of like merging of nature with materials and being worn on the body. And I've been experimenting a lot with invasive species. That's a whole other conversation, but invasive species and clothing and materials. And so that's something I've really been looking into recently.
To kind of piggyback on what she's saying, so right now, in the studio, I'm working on, you know, a brand new body of work. You know, so with that piece, the series is titled Water Grief and the 6 Shades of Death. And so I'm looking at the history of water as a vessel that has lived on the planet since the beginning. Water has been at the forefront of the 6 last decades of mass extinction. And so I'm ready to kind of explore this idea that, you know, what does water look like, you know, for the next couple of years? You know, I had the opportunity to go to Flint, Michigan last year, and, you know, speaking to the residents, speaking to an urban farmer really had an impact on me. And so for me, I want to, you know, keep doing the work that I'm making. For me, the work that I make is larger than me. It's really about the message and what I'm trying to communicate. I'm taking data, looking at scientific charts, and really trying to disseminate what is factual. You know, we live in an era of fake news, of misinformation. And so it's very important that I think artists and science can intersect and come together to present knowledge to the public.
Yes, I love that. That was a great way of putting that.
And we'll take one more question before we close it out, but Adrian Rose is asking, I guess maybe to both of you, but is gender a consideration in your work, specifically hybridity and gender and materials?
For me, yes. I look at, like, some of my work deals with this sort of like imagined human future, and in that potential human future, I see gender as being a much more fluid thing, which interfaces, yeah, with organic matter more. Like, I don't know, like a huge step into the future, what will bodies look like? Like, how will mating happen?
I'll say the same for me. In my work, I guess most of my figures are very gender neutral. They can be implied as feminine or masculine, but really, it's not really about the figure. It's about the message, and message is bigger than the actual vessel.
Okay, cool. Well, sorry, I think are we all still together? Sorry to ask, but the technical difficulties today have been quite disruptive. But anyway, Jenna, Morel, I want to thank you both so much for joining us today for this conversation. I think you both really illuminated just how, you know, similar both your art practices are. I also want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us for today's talk. Please save the date for our Ellies open call, which opens on June 2nd. And then we have a couple of other events that are coming soon, including another Ellies Connect, which will take place on June 3rd with Karen Reifus and Edouard Duval-Carrier. But thank you once again to Morel and Jenna. You guys were so stellar. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.